The sound of shattering crystal wasn't the loudest thing in the ballroom. It was the silence of 200 guests as my mother called me a disgrace through the microphone. She thought the vibration in my hand was fear as security dragged me toward the Chicago snow. It wasn't. It was a notification from a Swiss bank. $57 million had just cleared. I wasn't just holding their money, I was holding the secrets that would bury them. My name is Regina Blackwell, and for the last 5 years, I have lived in the shadow of a lie so well constructed it felt like the truth. The basement of the Blackwell estate was not designed for human habitation. It was a climate-controlled vault meant for aging wine and fur coats, not for a 29-year-old financial analyst trying to save a sinking Titanic of a company from hitting an iceberg of tax evasion. The air down here was always 12 degrees colder than the rest of the house, smelling of cedar and old money that had gone stale. My fingers were stiff as they flew across the keyboard of my battered laptop, the screen illuminating the dark circles under my eyes. Upstairs, the house was vibrating. I could hear the muffled thumping of bass from the sound system and the sharp clatter of preparation staff setting up for the annual Blackwell Charity Gala. It was the social event of the season in Chicago, a night where 300 of the city's elite would come to drink vintage champagne and marvel at how Catherine Blackwell, the grieving widow and CEO, managed to keep the family empire afloat. They did not know that the empire was currently running on fumes and credit extensions I had begged the bank for just 3 days ago. "Regina!" The voice cut through the silence like a whip. I didn't flinch. I just saved my spreadsheet, a habit born of paranoia, and turned my chair. Catherine Blackwell stood at the top of the basement stairs. Even in the harsh fluorescent light of the cellar, my mother looked immaculate. She was wearing a custom emerald gown that cost more than my entire year's tuition at university had. Her hair was a helmet of blonde perfection, and her face was frozen in that perpetual expression of mild distaste she reserved exclusively for me. She descended the stairs, her heels clicking against the concrete like gunfire. In her hand, she held a hanger. "You are still in those rags," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Guests are arriving in 45 minutes. I am working." "Mother," I said, gesturing to the stack of foreclosure notices I had hidden under a pile of invoices. "The IRS audit is next week. If I don't reconcile these accounts from 1999 to present, they are going to freeze everything, including the catering budget for tonight." Catherine laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Do not bore me with math, Regina. That is why we let you live here, to handle the boring parts." She threw the hanger at me. It landed on my desk. Sliding over the keyboard, it was a dress, a gray, shapeless thing made of scratchy chiffon. I recognized it. It was a bridesmaid dress from a cousin's wedding 6 years ago. It had a stain on the hem. "Put it on," she commanded. "This?" I picked up the fabric. "Mother, this has a wine stain on it. I have my own dress upstairs." "No," she said sharply. She walked over to my desk, her eyes scanning the screens filled with red numbers. "Tonight, you are not Regina the analyst. Tonight, you are Regina the problem child, the black sheep." I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "We need investors. Regina, sympathy opens wallets faster than competence. I have told the board members that your recent struggles have been a drain on the family resources, that we are supporting you through your recovery." My blood turned to ice. Recovery? I have never touched a drug in my life. I work 80 hours a week for Orion Data Solutions, and then I come here and work another 30 for you, for free. Details. She waved a hand dismissively. "The narrative is set. You are the tragic, chemically dependent daughter we are lovingly trying to save. It explains why our cash flow is tight. Medical bills, rehab centers. It makes me look like a saint, and Julian look like the responsible heir." "Julian?" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Julian is the reason the cash flow is tight. He lost $200,000 in Macau last month. I saw the wire transfer. Mother, I saw it this morning." Catherine's face hardened. The mask of the benevolent matriarch slipped, revealing the shark beneath. You were snooping, she hissed. I was auditing. I grabbed a sheaf of papers. And it is not just Julian. I found something else. In the archives. The ledger from the year Dad died. There are transfers here. Mother, huge ones. To a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The dates align exactly with the patent sale you claimed never happened. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush lungs. Catherine did not blink. She did not yell. She simply walked around the desk, her movements fluid and predatory. You have an overactive imagination, she said softly. And you are clearly overworked. Before I could react, she reached out and slammed my laptop shut. She yanked the power cord from the wall. Hey, I lunged for it, but she pulled it out of reach. I am confiscating this, she declared, tucking my lifeline under her arm. You are clearly delusional, paranoid, another symptom of your condition. I will have the IT team wipe this clean so you do not embarrass yourself with these conspiracy theories. Panic flared in my chest. That laptop had everything, the evidence of Julian's gambling debts, the falsified tax returns she forced me to sign, and the anomaly I had found in the patent logs. Give it back, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had suppressed for a decade. Get dressed, Regina, she said, turning her back on me. And fix your face. You look like a corpse, if you are not upstairs in 20 minutes, looking sufficiently pathetic and grateful. I will have security throw you out. And do not think about leaving. You know you have nowhere else to go. She walked up the stairs, the click-clack of her heels fading away. I stood there, trembling, but not from fear. My hand went to the pocket of my cardigan. My fingers closed around the cold metal of a USB drive, just seconds before she had unplugged the machine, while she was distracted by her own reflection in the darkened window. I had ejected the drive. I had everything. But having the truth and surviving the night were two different things. I looked at the gray dress. If she wanted a show, I would give her one. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of diamonds and malice. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roast duck. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner, struggling to be heard over the roar of polite gossip. I stood near the entrance, wearing the gray dress. It hung off my frame, making me look gaunt. I had not bothered to put on makeup, leaving the dark circles under my eyes visible. I saw guests glancing at me, then whispering behind their hands, "Is that her? The daughter?" I heard she spent 6 months in a facility in Arizona. Poor Catherine, to have such a burden. I kept my head down, clutching a glass of sparkling water like it was a shield. I needed to get through 3 hours. Then I could leave. I just needed to survive until the speeches were over so I could maintain access to the house server for one last download later tonight. Well, look who crawled out of the gutter. I didn't need to look up to know it was Julian. My brother smelled of brandy and desperation. He was wearing a tuxedo that was tailored to perfection, hiding the fact that he had gained 20 pounds from stress eating and drinking. "Julian," I said, keeping my voice low, "go away." "Mom says you're playing the role perfectly," he sneered, leaning in close. His eyes were bloodshot. "You know, you really should thank us. This addict story, it's the most interesting thing that has ever happened to you. I know about the debts. Julian," I whispered, "I know about the guys from the South Side who are looking for you." His smile faltered. For a second, I saw the terror behind his eyes. But then, he saw someone approaching. A potential investor. A man from Vanguard Corp. Julian's face switched instantly back to the arrogant air. "Oh, Regina, please," he shouted, his voice booming across the room. "I cannot give you any more money. You will just spend it on drugs." The conversation in the nearest circle died instantly. Heads turned. "Julian, stop," I hissed. "No. I am done enabling you." He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. He was shaking. He wasn't acting. He was channeling his own panic about his debts into rage at me. He grabbed a glass of red wine from a passing waiter's tray. "You want a drink? Is that it?" he yelled. "Julian, don't!" He splashed the wine directly into my face. The dark liquid burned my eyes and soaked into the gray chiffon. Looking like a fresh arterial wound across my chest, I gasped, blindingly wiping my eyes. "She's drunk," Julian announced to the horrified room. "Look at her. She is wasted at our mother's charity gala." A flash of light blinded me. Then another. I blinked the wine away to see my younger sister, Bella, standing 5 feet away. She was holding her phone up, the ring light attached to the case glowing like a demonic halo. She was live streaming. "Guys, you literally won't believe this," Bella said to her screen, her voice pitched in that fake, bubbly influencer tone. "My sister just attacked my brother. She is totally out of it. This is the reality of addiction. You guys, it tears families apart. Family drama. Real life, pray for us." I stood there, the wine dripping off my chin onto the marble floor. I looked around the room. 300 pairs of eyes stared back. Judgment, disgust, pity. Not one person moved to help me. Then, the microphone screeched. Catherine stood on the stage at the front of the room. She looked down at me, her face a mask of tragic resolve. The spotlight hit her, turning her into a martyr in emerald silk. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I apologize deeply. I tried. God knows I tried." She gestured toward me as if I were a stain on the carpet. "I have spent the last 5 years trying to help my daughter, Regina. I have paid for doctors. I have paid for rehab. I have covered up her mistakes. I thought that if I loved her enough, I could fix her." "Liar," I whispered. But no one heard me. "But tonight," Catherine continued, her voice gaining strength, "I realize that I have been enabling her behavior. I have let her drain this family dry. My other children, Julian and Bella, have suffered because I have been funneling our resources into a black hole." She took a deep breath. "Regina, I love you, but I cannot let you destroy this family anymore. You are just an extra mouth to feed, and we have nothing left to give you." The phrase hung in the air. An extra mouth to feed. I felt a strange calmness settle over me. It was the clarity of absolute zero. "Security," Catherine said, her voice turning cold. "Please escort her out. She is no longer welcome in this house. She is no longer a Blackwell." 2 large men in dark suits materialized at my elbows. They didn't ask me to leave. They grabbed me. One seized my bicep. The other grabbed my forearm. "I can walk," I said, my voice steady. "Move," one of them grunted. They dragged me toward the double doors. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I saw Julian smirking, taking a sip of fresh champagne. I saw Bella panning her camera to follow my exit, checking her viewer count with a gleeful smile. I saw Catherine turning back to the microphone to accept the applause of the crowd for her bravery. The doors burst open. The heat and light of the ballroom vanished, replaced instantly by the biting wind of a Chicago January. They didn't stop at the foyer. They dragged me out the front entrance, down the limestone steps, and threw me onto the driveway. "And stay out," the guard said. He tossed a duffel bag onto the snow beside me. It was my gym bag. They must have packed it while I was downstairs. The heavy oak doors slammed shut. The lock clicked. I was alone. The cold was instantaneous. It bit through the wet, wine-soaked dress, like 1,000 needles. The wind chill was 20 degrees below zero. The snow was already seeping into my shoes. I slowly stood up. My knees were shaking, but my spine was steel. I looked up at the mansion. The windows glowed with golden light. I could hear the faint sound of applause resuming inside. They were celebrating my exile. They thought the problem was solved. They thought the leech had been removed. I didn't cry. Tears would freeze on my face, and I refused to give them the satisfaction of my pain. I picked up the duffel bag. It was light, probably just a few changes of clothes. No coat. I walked to the main gate, the security guard in the booth. A man I had brought coffee to every morning for 3 years refused to look me in the eye as he buzzed the pedestrian gate open. I walked 3 blocks through the snow to the nearest gas station. My skin was turning blue. I couldn't feel my toes. I used the payphone to call a taxi, my fingers so numb I could barely press the buttons. 20 minutes later, the cab dropped me off at the Starlight Motel on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. I paid the driver with the emergency cash I kept in my bra. I checked into room 12. The room was freezing. The heater rattled and coughed out lukewarm dust. I sat on the sagging bed, the springs groaning under my weight. I was shivering violently now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving only the bone-deep cold. I reached into the pocket of the gray dress. For a second, panic seized me. Had it fallen out in the snow? Had the security guards taken it? My fingers brushed against plastic. I pulled it out. The silver USB drive caught the flickering light of the neon sign outside the window. I stripped off the ruined dress and threw it in the corner. I wrapped myself in the thin, scratchy motel blanket and sat on the floor, plugging the drive into the room's ancient television which, miraculously, had a USB port for media. I didn't need a computer to know what was on it. I had seen the file names before I copied them. Blackwell_offshore_accounts _2020 to 2025 .xlsx patent_US 88492 _transfer _protocol .pdf Julian _gambling _debts _settlement .pdf. And the most important one, a folder simply titled Dad's Insurance Policy. My mother had called me an extra mouth to feed. She had thrown me into the snow to save her reputation. She thought she had stripped me of everything, my home, my name, my dignity. But as I stared at the little blinking light of the drive, I realized she had made a fatal calculation error. She had kept the furniture and thrown out the vault key. I wasn't the extra mouth to feed. I was the one who was about to starve them out. I lay back on the hard floor and watched the ceiling fan spin. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, warming up, while my mind began to construct a plan that was colder than the storm outside. The party was over. The war had just begun. The transition from silk sheets to a mattress that smelled of mildew and stale cigarette smoke was not as jarring as one might think. When you have spent your entire life sleeping with one eye open, waiting for the next emotional blow. The physical discomfort of a cheap motel is almost negligible. I found a studio apartment 3 days after the gala. It was in a neighborhood that real estate agents politely described as up-and-coming, which in Chicago meant it was 2 blocks away from a condemned building, and the wind rattled the windows so hard I thought they might shatter every time a train went by. The rent was $800 a month. It took nearly every cent of the cash I had managed to withdraw before Catherine froze my accounts. But it was mine. It had a dripping faucet, a radiator that hissed like an angry cat, and a deadlock on the door that I checked 3 times before bed. For the first time in 29 years, the air I breathed did not belong to the Blackwells. My days became a blur of gray routine. I had kept my job at Orion Data Solutions, but only just. I went to my boss, a man named Marcus, who had more kindness in his little finger than my entire family had in their bloodline, and told him a half-truth. I told him I had a family emergency and needed to step back from client-facing roles. I asked to be moved to the back-end data processing team. It was a demotion. It meant a 40% pay cut and sitting in a cubicle the size of a coffin, scrubbing raw data sets for 8 hours a day. It was perfect. Nobody looked at the data processors. We were the ghosts of the corporate machine. While the city buzzed with the scandal of the drug addict heiress, a headline my mother had planted in the tabloids with efficient cruelty, I was invisible. I wore oversized hoodies and glasses I didn't need. I ate lunch at my desk. I became a ghost. But while the world thought I was spiraling into rock bottom, I was actually climbing. Every evening, I would return to my damp apartment, lock the door, and open the laptop I had bought from a pawn shop with the last of my jewelry. I couldn't risk connecting the USB drive to the Orion network. If Catherine's lawyers were tracking digital signatures, one ping could lead them right to my cubicle. So I worked offline, in the dark. With only the blue light of the screen illuminating my face, the drive was a labyrinth. My father, Richard Blackwell, had not been a man of simple words. He was a paranoid genius who saw patterns where others saw chaos. The files were encrypted with layers of security that would have baffled a standard forensic accountant. But I was not standard. I was his daughter. I knew how he thought. I knew that his passwords were never birthdays or anniversaries. They were mathematical constants and obscure historical dates related to the Industrial Revolution. It took me 2 weeks to break the first layer. During those 2 weeks, the Blackwell empire was bleeding. I watched it happen on the small television I had set up on a stack of milk crates. The stock price of Blackwell Luxury had dropped 15% since the gala. The pundits on the financial news channels were blaming it on internal instability and leadership questions. Catherine was fighting back the only way she knew how, by destroying me. One Tuesday night, while eating instant noodles, I saw Bella on a talk show. She was wiping away a fake tear, telling the host how hard it was to watch her big sister throw her life away for a high. She claimed I had stolen jewelry before I left. She claimed I had threatened to burn the house down. The audience gasped. The host looked sympathetic. I felt a flash of hot anger in my chest. But I forced it down. Let them talk. Let them think I am defeated. Every lie they told was just another shovel of dirt they were digging out of their own graves. I turned off the TV and went back to the code. That night, the final encryption wall crumbled. The folder that opened was titled Project Hephaestus. I clicked it open, and my breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just tax returns. It was a blueprint. My father hadn't just been running a luxury goods company. In the years before he died, he had been funding a private research and development wing that didn't appear on any of the official company org charts. He had been developing a synthetic material, a type of eco-leather derived from mycelium structures, but treated with a specific, proprietary polymer that made it indistinguishable from the finest calfskin, yet 10 times more durable and completely waterproof. He had called it the Blackwell Weave. I scrolled through the PDF documents, my eyes widening with every page. He had filed the patent for the chemical process 6 months before the car accident that killed him. The patent number was right there, US 88492. But here was the anomaly. According to the public records I had checked 1,000 times, Blackwell Luxury did not own any major material patents. They bought their leather from Italian suppliers like everyone else. That was why the profit margins were shrinking. The cost of raw materials was skyrocketing. So where was the Blackwell weave? I dove into the financial ledgers Catherine had tried to hide. It took me 3 hours of cross-referencing bank transfers to find the truth. It was buried in a sub-account labeled consulting fees. Catherine knew about the patent. She had known about it the whole time. Instead of developing the material and saving the company, she had been secretly licensing the formula to our biggest competitors in Europe. She was selling the golden goose's eggs out the back door for quick cash to fund her galas and Julian's gambling debts, while the company itself starved to death. It was corporate espionage, committed by the CEO against her own company, but that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was in the last will and testament attached to the patent filing. My hands shook as I read the legal text. My father had inserted a dead man's switch. It was a fail-safe clause, hidden in the dense legalese of the trust agreement holding the patent. Clause 19, Section B. In the event that the acting trustee, Catherine Blackwell, is found to be acting in bad faith, engaging in embezzlement, or failing to utilize the intellectual property for the primary benefit of Blackwell Luxury for a period exceeding 24 months, the ownership of said intellectual property shall bypass the primary beneficiary and transfer immediately and in full to the direct lineal descendant possessing the requisite financial and operational competency to manage the asset. Requisite financial and operational competency. Julian was an art school dropout who couldn't balance a checkbook. Bella was a college freshman majoring in social media marketing. I was a chartered financial analyst with a master's degree in economics and 5 years of operational experience. My father had written this for me. He had known, even back then, he had known that Catherine would choose quick money over long-term stability. He had left this for me as a lifeboat, waiting for the day I would be smart enough to find it. I sat back in my creaky chair, the magnitude of the discovery washing over me. I did a quick valuation based on the current market rates for sustainable textiles. If the Blackwell weave was as good as the test results said, it wasn't just a product, it was a revolution in the fashion industry. Conservative estimates put the value of the exclusive patent rights at $50 million, maybe 60. My mother was trying to sell the company to Vanguard Corp for $100 million, likely claiming the patent was part of the deal. But if I triggered Clause 19, the patent wasn't hers to sell, it was mine, and without the patent, Blackwell Luxury was just a brand name attached to a pile of debt. I closed the laptop. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had the bullet, I had the gun, but I didn't know how to pull the trigger. If I walked into a courtroom now, Catherine's team of 10 lawyers would bury me in motions and injunctions until I ran out of money, which would happen in about 3 months. They would claim the evidence was stolen. They would claim I was mentally unstable. They would drag it out for years. I didn't have years. The sale to Vanguard Corp was rumored to be closing in less than a month. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I needed someone who was brilliant, vicious, and who hated Catherine Blackwell as much as I did. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow swirling under the streetlights. 10 years ago, there was a man named Elias Thorne. He had been the rising star of corporate litigation in Chicago. He was young, hungry, and unstoppable. Then he made the mistake of representing a former housekeeper who accused Catherine of wrongful termination. Catherine didn't just win the case, she destroyed him. She used her connections to dig up dirt on his personal life, spread rumors about ethical violations, and got him disbarred for 2 years. He lost his firm, his wife, and his reputation. I remembered hearing my mother laugh about it over dinner one night. "We clipped his wings," she had said, sipping her wine. "Let that be a lesson. Children, never bite the hand that feeds you, even if you think you are starving." I went back to my laptop and opened a search engine. I typed in his name, Elias Thorne. The results were sparse. No big firm website, no recent high-profile wins, just a listing for a small general practice in a strip mall on the south side of the city, sandwiched between a laundromat and a payday loan center. The most recent review was from 3 months ago. For a DUI defense. He was at the bottom, just like me. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I grabbed my coat. I couldn't wait. The hunger for justice was sharper than the hunger in my stomach. I knew I wouldn't sleep tonight. I had to know if the shark was still swimming, or if my mother had truly turned him into a minnow. I packed the laptop and the USB drive into my backpack. I double-locked the door to my studio. As I walked out into the freezing wind to catch the night bus, I touched the pocket where the drive sat. "Hang on, Dad," I whispered to the empty street. "I'm coming." The sign on the door was peeling. It read, "Thorne Legal Services" in letters that had once been gold, but were now a flaky, depressing brown. The office was located in a strip mall between a laundromat and a discount tobacco shop. The air in the hallway smelled of dryer sheets and unwashed carpet. It was a long way down from the glass-walled corner office on the 42nd floor that Elias Thorne used to occupy, a place I had visited once as a child when my father was still alive. I knocked. "We are closed," a voice rasped from inside. It sounded like gravel being crushed under a heavy boot. "I have money," I called out, "and I have a way to hurt Catherine Blackwell." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence where the only sound was the hum of the soda machine down the hall. Then, the lock clicked. The door opened a few inches. Elias Thorne stood there. He looked older than the pictures I had found online. His hair was thinning and gray, his shirt was wrinkled, and there were deep lines etched around his mouth that spoke of too many nights spent staring at the bottom of a glass. But his eyes were the same. They were sharp, intelligent, and currently narrowed in suspicion. "You," he said flatly, "you are the daughter, the one they kicked out. May I come in?" He looked me up and down. taking in my cheap coat and the backpack slung over my shoulder. He didn't open the door wider. "I don't work for Blackwell's," he said. "I learned that lesson the hard way. Go home, kid." "I don't have a home," I said, blocking the door with my foot before he could slam it. "Catherine took it, just like she took your career. I am not here to ask for a favor. Mr. Thorne, I am here to offer you the weapon you have been looking for 10 years. He hesitated. The mention of my mother's name made a muscle in his jaw twitch. He stepped back, leaving the door open. 5 minutes, he grunted. Walking back to his desk, the office was a disaster zone of paperwork, takeout containers, and law books stacked in precarious towers. He sat down in a leather chair that had seen better decades and gestured to a folding metal chair opposite him. I sat down and pulled the laptop from my bag. I didn't waste time with small talk. I booted it up and opened the file labeled Project Hephaestus. I spun the laptop around so he could see the screen. My father developed a proprietary material called the Blackwell Weave, I said, keeping my voice steady. Catherine hid the patent. She has been licensing it illegally to competitors. She is currently trying to sell the company, including this intellectual property, to Vanguard Corp. for $100 million. Elias leaned forward, putting on a pair of reading glasses. He scrolled through the documents. At first, his expression was bored, dismissive, but as he read the technical specifications and the dates on the wire transfers I had uncovered, his posture changed. He sat up straighter. The boredom vanished, replaced by the predator's focus I remembered from his prime. "This is fraud," he muttered. "Massive, systemic corporate fraud, but she will bury you. Regina. She will claim you forged these. She has a team of 20 lawyers who do nothing but bill hours and destroy lives." "Keep reading," I said. "Scroll to the bottom. Clause 19. Elias scrolled. He read the text. He stopped. He read it again. Then he looked up at me, and for the first time, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. "The dead man's switch," he whispered. "If she manages the company in bad faith, the patent reverts to the heir." "I am the heir," I said, "and I have the proof of bad faith." Elias closed the laptop and leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. He looked at the ceiling, letting out a low whistle. "You don't want to sue her for damages," he said. Thinking aloud, "If we file a lawsuit now, she will delay the sale to Vanguard. She will tie this up in court for 5 years. By the time we win, the technology will be obsolete and the money will be gone." "Exactly," I said. "I don't want a settlement. I want the patent, and I want to leave her with nothing." "So we wait," Elias said, his eyes locking onto mine. "We let her dig the hole deeper. We let her sign the contract with Vanguard. The moment she puts her pen to that paper and warrants that she owns the intellectual property, she commits a fresh act of fraud, and more importantly, that is the moment we trigger Clause 19. "Can we do that?" I asked. "If we time it right," Elias said, standing up and beginning to pace the small room. The energy in the office had shifted completely. It was no longer a place of defeat. It was a war room. "We need to file the motion to enforce the trust clause exactly when the closing meeting begins. We walk in with a court order confirming your ownership. Vanguard will be sitting there with a $100 million check, and Catherine will be sitting there trying to sell them something she just lost 5 minutes ago. It has to be perfect," I said. "If she catches wind of this, if she suspects I have this information, she will destroy the evidence or force me to sign a waiver." "She thinks you are a junkie," Elias noted. "She thinks you are broken." "We need to keep it that way," I replied. "There is another problem," Elias said, stopping in front of a whiteboard covered in unrelated case notes. He wiped a section clean with his sleeve. "Why is she selling now? The Blackwells never sell. They hoard." "Julian," I said. "My brother." I opened a new tab on my laptop and showed him the other file I had found. It was a series of encrypted messages and loan agreements from a shadow lender in Macau. "Julian is in the hole for $8 million, I explained. The interest is compounding daily. The people he owes are not banks. They are the kind of people who break kneecaps first and ask for payment second. He has been pressuring Catherine to sell. He needs the payout from the Vanguard deal to save his life. Desperation makes people sloppy, Elias mused, but it also makes them dangerous. If Julian knows his life is on the line, he will push this deal through fast. Do we know the timeline? Vanguard is demanding a due diligence audit, I said. But Julian is trying to bypass it. I saw an email draft in his outbox. He is offering a discount if they close by next Friday. Next Friday, Elias repeated. 10 days. We have 10 days to build a case that usually takes 6 months. He looked at me. I can draft the motions. I still know judges who hate your mother almost as much as I do. I can get the emergency hearing sealed so it doesn't hit the public docket until we walk into that room, but you have the harder job. What is that? You have to disappear, Elias said. Or rather, you have to appear exactly where they expect you to be, in the gutter, if you go quiet. Catherine gets paranoid. Paranoid people check their flanks. We need her arrogant. We need her to look at you and see zero threat. I nodded. I understood. To win, I had to lose. Publicly. 2 days later, I put the second phase of our plan into motion. I was still working for Orion Data Solutions, but my demotion allowed me some flexibility. I had a meeting scheduled with a client who owned a chain of high-end diners in the Loop. He wanted to discuss his data security protocols. I arranged to meet him at his flagship restaurant at 2 p.m. I arrived 20 minutes early. I wasn't wearing my usual business attire. I wore a faded black t-shirt and black trousers that were slightly too short. I had tied my hair back in a messy bun and applied makeup to make my skin look sallow and tired. I walked into the restaurant. It was the post-lunch lull. I'm here to see Mr. Henderson, I told the hostess. He is in the back office, she said. He asked if you could wait at table 4. Table 4 was right next to the floor-to-ceiling window facing the busy street. It was also, not coincidentally, directly across the street from the boutique where Bella bought her overpriced handbags every Thursday. I sat down. A waiter, a young man who looked overworked, was clearing the table next to me. He dropped a tray of dirty silverware. Oh, let me help, I said instinctively, crouching down to pick up a fork. No, miss, please, I got it, he stammered. It's fine, I said. I picked up the tray. For a moment, I stood there, holding a tray of dirty dishes, looking for a place to set it down. That was when I saw the flash. I looked through the window. Bella was there. She was standing on the sidewalk, holding her phone up, her mouth open in a performative gasp. She snapped 3 photos in rapid succession. I didn't hide. I didn't turn away. I looked right at her, letting my shoulders slump, letting the misery wash over my face. I held the tray of dirty dishes like it was my entire life. Bella smirked. It was a cruel, satisfied little twist of her lips. She tapped furiously on her screen, then laughed and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Mr. Henderson hadn't even arrived yet. It was a notification from Instagram. A friend request from a fake account I used to monitor my siblings. Bella had posted the photo. The caption read, "Karma is real. You guys." Just saw my sister scrubbing tables downtown, from heiress to waitress in 1 week. Maybe now she will learn the value of $1. So sad. But she did this to herself. Blackwell curse reality check, work hard. The comments were already pouring in. OMG, that is tragic. She looks terrible. Serves her right. I sat back in the chair and placed the tray back on the waiter's station. I took out my phone and forwarded the post to Elias. A moment later, he replied with a single word. Perfect. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment and monitored the network traffic from the Blackwell estate. I still had the backdoor access through Julian's compromised gaming console. He never updated his firmware. I saw Catherine's device log on. She opened the link to Bella's post. She stayed on the page for 5 minutes. Then, I saw her send an email to the head of her legal team. Subject: the issue. Body: saw the pictures. She is waiting tables. She is finished. Stop worrying about her contesting the will. She can't even afford a sandwich, let alone a lawyer. Focus all resources on closing the Vanguard deal by Friday. I want this done. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. She had swallowed the bait. By assuming I was weak, she had just dismissed her security detail. She had pulled her legal team off defense and put them all on the offense to close the sale. She was leaving her flank completely exposed because she thought her enemy was defeated, but the clock was ticking louder now. I saw another email, this one from Vanguard Corp to Julian. Mr. Blackwell, per your request, we have expedited the due diligence. We are prepared to sign the acquisition papers next Friday at 9 in the morning. Please ensure all intellectual property documentation is present. Next Friday, 9 in the morning, that was our deadline. I had 7 days to help Elias build a case that would withstand the wrath of a woman who had never lost a fight in her life. I looked at the date on the corner of my screen. It was February. The weather forecast called for a blizzard next Friday. Let it snow, I whispered. I went back to work, typing furiously. I had to authenticate the timestamp on the patent filing. I had to trace the path of every dollar Catherine had stolen. I had to make sure that when we walked into that room, we didn't just have a case. We had a guillotine. The phone rang. It was Elias. I found something else, he said, his voice buzzing with the static of a cheap connection. I was digging into the Vanguard executives. The guy leading the acquisition? He isn't just a corporate suit. He is a stickler for compliance. He fired his own brother last year for an ethics violation. That is good for us, I said. It is, Elias agreed. But it means we can't just walk in and shout fraud. We need to prove it mathematically. He won't care about your sob story. Regina, he will care about the numbers. If the numbers don't add up to the penny, he signs the deal with your mother, and we lose. The numbers will add up, I promised. I am a data analyst. Elias, numbers are the only family I have left. Get some sleep, kid, Elias said. Tomorrow we go to war. I hung up. I didn't sleep. Instead, I pulled up the floor plan of the Blackwell office tower. The signing would be in the boardroom on the 50th floor. I memorized the exits. I memorized the security checkpoints. I wasn't just walking into a meeting. I was walking into the lion's den. And this time, I wasn't going to be the meal. I was going to be the hunter. The image of Bella's smirk on the screen burned in my mind. They were laughing now. They were clinking glasses and toasting to their victory. Let them laugh. It would make the silence next Friday all the more satisfying. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my studio apartment. On the display, a high-definition video feed flickered in real time. It was a view I knew well, the mahogany-paneled study of the Blackwell estate. My brother, Julian, had always been lazy. It was his defining trait, second only to his greed. When he installed the new state-of-the-art security system 6 months ago, he hadn't bothered to change the factory administrative password. He had left it as admin1234. He probably thought no one would ever dare to hack the great Blackwell fortress. He was wrong. I sat on my floor, eating a cold sandwich, watching my family destroy themselves. It has to be signed. Julian! Catherine's voice came through the speakers, tinny but distinct. She was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, a glass of scotch in her hand. Vanguard's legal team sent the checklist an hour ago. Item number 4. A waiver of interest from all potential beneficiaries of the Richard Blackwell Trust. Julian was sitting at Father's desk, a desk he had never earned the right to sit behind. He looked sweaty, his tie was loosened, and his hair was a mess. She won't sign it, Mother, Julian snapped. You threw her out in the snow. You think she is going to do us a favor now? She is probably dead in a ditch somewhere. She is not dead, Catherine hissed. She is waiting tables. I saw the pictures. She is desperate, but we do not have time to find her and negotiate. If Vanguard smells even a whiff of a legal dispute, they walk. And if they walk, Julian, the men you owe money to, will not be as polite as I am. Julian flinched. The threat was real. I knew about the text messages on his phone. The loan sharks were giving him until the end of the month. "So what do we do?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. Catherine stopped pacing. She walked over to the desk and placed a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper in front of him. "We do what needs to be done," she said. "Regina has been unavailable, mentally unstable. We simply execute the document on her behalf, based on the verbal power of attorney she gave us before her breakdown." "You want me to forge it?" Julian whispered. "I want you to secure your future," Catherine corrected. "Use the pen from the drawer, the Mont Blanc. It has the same ink flow as the one she used to sign checks with." I watched, my sandwich forgotten. As Julian opened the drawer, he took out the pen. He hesitated for a second, his hand hovering over the paper. Then, desperation won. He lowered the pen and began to write. I leaned in closer to my screen. The camera angle was perfect. I could see the document clearly. It was a waiver of rights and interest, dated 3 weeks ago, 2 days before the gala. They were backdating it to make it look like I had signed away my rights before they kicked me out. Julian finished with a flourish. He held it up. "It looks like hers," he said. "It is hers," Catherine said firmly. "As far as anyone else is concerned, file it with the diligence papers, scan it, and send it to Vanguard tonight." I hit the record button on my screen capture software. "Got you," I whispered. They had just handed me a felony conviction on a silver platter. But I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. Arresting them now would stop the sale. I needed the sale to go through. I needed the money to be in the bank before I pulled the rug out. The next morning, I walked into Orion Data Solutions with a new energy. The demotion I had requested was actually paying off in ways I hadn't expected. My boss, Marcus, called me into his office at 10 o'clock. "Regina," he said, looking at a report on his desk. I was reviewing the batch processing logs from last week. "You cleaned up the client database for the Peterson account?" "Yes," I said, adjusting my glasses. "I noticed some redundancies in the SQL queries, so I rewrote the script to optimize the fetch time. It should run about 40% faster now." Marcus looked at me over the rim of his spectacles. 40%? "Regina, the engineering team has been trying to optimize that database for 6 months. You did it in 2 afternoons?" "I like clean data," I said simply. Marcus leaned back. "I know you said you have personal issues and wanted less responsibility, but I cannot in good conscience keep someone with your skills doing data entry. It is a waste of company resources." I stiffened. I couldn't lose this job. I needed the income to pay Elias. "Please, Marcus," I began. "I really need the stability right now." "I am not firing you," he interrupted, smiling kindly. "I am promoting you, Senior Systems Analyst. It is a back-office role, so no client meetings if you do not want them, but it comes with a $20,000 raise, effective immediately." I blinked. $20,000. That was rent for a year. That was food. But more importantly, that was the suit. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with genuine emotion. "You have no idea what this means to me." "You earned it," he said. "Go buy yourself a nice lunch." I didn't buy lunch. On my break, I went to a high-end consignment shop 3 blocks away. I found it in the back. A charcoal gray Armani power suit that looked like it had been tailored for me. It was sharp, severe, and screamed authority. It cost $400, which was a fortune, but I bought it without hesitation. I wasn't buying clothes. I was buying a costume for the role of executioner. My phone buzzed incessantly throughout the afternoon. It was Bella. Since she had posted the picture of me waitressing, she had been emboldened. "She thought I was broken, Bella. Hey sis, Mom is really worried about you. She wants to help." Bella. "We have a small trust fund payout that was scheduled for next year. Mom says she can release it early to help you get back on your feet. It is $5,000. Bella. "All you have to do is sign a little paper confirming you received it and that you have no other claims against the estate. Just standard legal stuff so the accountants are happy." I sat in my cubicle and typed my reply slowly. I had to sound pathetic. I had to sound beaten. Regina. 5,000? That would really help. I am 2 months behind on rent. They are going to evict me. Bella. OMG, that is terrible. I will send the driver with the papers. Where are you? Regina. No. I do not want the driver to see me like this. I am ashamed. Can I come to the house? Bella. Mom does not want you at the house. It is too emotional for her right now. Just meet me at the Starbucks on Michigan Avenue tomorrow at noon. Regina. I do not have money for the train. I am sick today. Can we do it next week? Please. Bella. I really need the money. Bella. Ugh, fine. But hurry up. Mom is trying to close the books. I put the phone down. Stall tactics. Every day. I delayed signing that paper was another day Catherine's sweat bullets. They needed my signature, real or forged, to close the Vanguard deal cleanly by delaying. I was forcing them to rely on the forged document Julian had created. I was forcing them to commit to the lie. That night, Elias came to my apartment. He brought Chinese takeout and a thick folder of documents. Vanguard is getting nervous, he said, opening a box of Kung Pao chicken. They are asking for a deeper audit of the inventory, apparently. Someone tipped them off that the valuation of the unsold stock was inflated. He looked at me with a knowing smirk. I have no idea who would do such a thing, I said, innocently opening a soy sauce packet. Right, Elias said. Well, whoever did it is a genius. Vanguard sent a revised term sheet this morning. They dropped the offer price from $110 million to $95 million. Catherine must be screaming, I said. She is, Elias confirmed. But she accepted it. That is the story. Regina. She accepted a $15 million price cut without a fight. She is desperate to close before the end of the month. We need to push her harder, I said. We need her to run into that closing room. I pulled up my laptop. Vanguard's lead auditor is a man named Simon LaGrange. I looked him up. He is thorough, but he is overworked. He is currently managing 3 acquisitions. He is relying on the data room provided by the seller. And I still have access to the upload logs, I said. I can see what Catherine's team is uploading. I showed Elias the screen. Look at this. Q4 financial statements _final, PDF. They uploaded it an hour ago. I opened the file. It showed a healthy profit margin for the last quarter. Then I opened another file, one I had pulled from the raw server data before I left. This is the real Q4 statement, I said. They lost $2 million. If we send this to Vanguard, they will kill the deal, Elias warned. We do not want to kill the deal. We want them to buy the company so you can take the patent. I am not going to send them the whole thing, I said. I am just going to send a question. I opened a secure, anonymous email browser. I typed a message to Simon LaGrange. Subject: Inquiry regarding Blackwell inventory. Depreciation. Dear Mr. LaGrange, as a former junior analyst familiar with the luxury sector, I suggest you cross-reference the inventory write-offs in the 2024 ledger against the warehouse shipping logs. There seems to be a discrepancy regarding the flood damage claims from that winter. I didn't attach any files. I just planted the seed of doubt. Send, I said, hitting the key. Elias laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound. You are terrifying. I learned from the best, I said. My mother, the reaction was immediate. The next morning, the Blackwell house was in chaos. I watched the camera feed while I drank my coffee. Catherine was on the phone, screaming so loud the microphone was peaking. What do you mean they want a physical warehouse inspection? That will take weeks. We do not have weeks. She slammed the phone down. Julian was pacing, chewing on his fingernails. They know, Mom, he whined. Someone is leaking stuff. Is it Regina? Don't be stupid, Catherine snapped. Regina is begging Bella for bus fare. She is too busy trying to survive to read financial ledgers. It is probably a disgruntled employee or a corporate spy. She took a deep breath, smoothing her skirt. We cannot let them do a warehouse inspection. If they see the empty shelves, the valuation drops to zero. So what do we do? Julian asked. We force the close, Catherine said. Call Vanguard. Tell them we have a competing offer from LVMH. Tell them they have to sign by this Friday or we walk. But we don't have another offer, Julian cried. They don't know that, Catherine shouted. It is a bluff, you idiot. It is the only card we have left. Tell them we are willing to drop the price to $90 million if they sign on Friday. No more inspections. As is. Where is? I smiled. $90 million. And a rushed closing date. Friday. That was 3 days away. My phone buzzed. It was Elias. Elias. They took the bait. Closing is set for Friday. 9 a.m. Boardroom, A. Vanguard wants it done fast to lock in the price. Regina. Are the court papers ready? Elias. Drafted, stamped, and ready to serve. The judge signed the ex parte order an hour ago based on the forgery evidence you sent me. We are locked and loaded. I looked at the gray suit hanging on the back of my bathroom door. It looked like a suit of armor waiting for its knight. Bella texted me again. Bella. Serious question. Are you coming to sign the papers or not? Mom is getting super annoyed. I typed back one last lie. Regina. I am sorry. Bella. I cannot make it. I am too sick to travel. Just go ahead without me. I trust you guys. It was the final stroke. By telling them I wouldn't be there, I ensured they wouldn't expect me. They would walk into that boardroom thinking I was shivering in a bed somewhere. Defeated and compliant. They would have no security at the door looking for me. They would have no lawyers prepared to argue against an heir they thought had already surrendered. The trap was not just set, it was baited, and the jaws were wide open. I spent the rest of the night printing documents, the forged waiver, the real patent filing, the email chains proving Catherine's knowledge of the fraud. I organized them into 2 binders, one for Elias, one for me. As I worked, I thought about the winter in Chicago. It was harsh. It killed the weak. But for those who knew how to survive the cold, it clarified things. It stripped away the soft, unnecessary parts of the world and left only the hard, unyielding truth. My mother had tried to freeze me out. She didn't realize that the cold was my element now. I turned off the lights in my apartment. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside, casting long shadows across the floor. See you on Friday. Mother, I whispered. I went to bed and, for the first time in a month, I slept soundly. The Thursday before the signing, the air in Chicago hung heavy and gray, pressing down on the city like a wet wool blanket. I was sitting in my old motel room at the Starlight. I had kept the lease active, paying the weekly rate in cash, purely as a decoy. It was a stage set, designed to look exactly like the rock bottom my family desperately wanted me to be at. I had scattered empty instant noodle cups on the table. I left a pile of unpaid medical bills, fake, on the nightstand. I even draped the ruined gray chiffon dress over the back of the single chair. I was waiting. Elias had tipped me off. His contact in the private car service industry, a man who owed him a favor from a custody battle, had told him that a black Mercedes registered to Blackwell Luxury had requested a pickup. Destination: the Starlight Motel. They weren't taking chances with the forged signature. They wanted the real one. They were coming to close the loop. At 4 o'clock, a knock rattled the flimsy door. I took a deep breath, messed up my hair, and opened the door just a crack. Catherine Blackwell stood there. She was wearing a camel hair coat that cost more than this entire building. Behind her, looming like a sulking gargoyle, was Julian. "Regina," Catherine said. Her voice was soft, trembling with an emotion that, to an untrained ear, might have sounded like concern. "May we come in? It is freezing out here." I stepped back, wordlessly letting them into the cramped, smelling room. Catherine looked around, her nose wrinkling slightly before she masked it with a look of pained sympathy. She touched the peeling wallpaper. "Oh, my poor darling," she whispered. "Is this where you have been living?" "It is what I can afford." Mother, I said, keeping my head down. This is unacceptable, Catherine said, turning to me with tears in her eyes. I have not slept a wink since that night. I was so angry. Regina, the stress of the company, your condition. I said things I did not mean. She reached out and took my hands. Her gloves were soft leather. Her hands were warm. Mine were cold. We are selling the company tomorrow, she said. I am doing it for us. For you. The stress of running Blackwell Luxury destroyed your father, and it is destroying us. I want to liquidate it so I can set up a trust for you, a real one, so you can get the help you need and live comfortably for the rest of your life. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. If I hadn't seen the emails, if I hadn't heard her call me an extra mouth to feed, I might have believed her. She was playing the role of the sacrificial mother perfectly. You want to help me? I asked, my voice small. Of course, she said. She snapped her fingers at Julian. Julian stepped forward and pulled a document from his coat pocket. He placed it on the table next to the noodle cups. It is a standard release form, Catherine explained, her voice soothing. It just says that you agree to the sale and that you trust me to handle the proceeds for your benefit. Once you sign this, I can transfer $50,000 to your account today. Right now, you can leave this place tonight. Regina, you can go to a hotel. You can get a hot meal. $50,000. She was selling a $100 million company, stealing a $50 million patent that belonged to me, and offering me $50,000 to keep my mouth shut. It was 0.05%. It was an insult disguised as a lifeline. And if I don't sign? I asked. The mask slipped. Just for a fraction of a second. Julian stepped closer, his bulk filling the small room. Just sign the paper, Regina, he growled. Don't be difficult. We are trying to save you. I don't know, I stammered, backing away until my legs hit the bed. I subtly checked the position of my phone, which was face down on the mattress, recording everything. I think I should have a lawyer look at it. A lawyer? Catherine laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. Regina, look at you. You cannot afford a lawyer, and why would you need one against your own mother? Do you think I am trying to trick you? You forged my signature, I said. The room went dead silent. Catherine froze. Julian's eyes widened. I saw the diligence papers. I lied, my voice shaking with feigned terror. You already sent a waiver to Vanguard with my name on it, dated 3 weeks ago. Catherine's face hardened. The tears evaporated instantly. The concerned mother vanished, replaced by the CEO. You are delusional, she said coldly. That is the drugs talking. I am not on drugs, I yelled. I know what you did. You forged it because you knew I wouldn't sign. Julian lunged. He grabbed me by the shoulders and slammed me against the wall. Listen to me, you little leech, he hissed, his face inches from mine. He smelled of stale alcohol and fear. You are going to sign this paper right now. You have no idea what is at stake. I owe people money. Regina, dangerous people. If this deal doesn't close tomorrow, they are going to kill me. And if they don't kill me, I might just kill you myself for ruining this. Julian! Catherine barked. Let her go. He released me. Shoving me back onto the bed, I gasped, rubbing my shoulder. He is right, though, Catherine said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. We are past the point of negotiation. We did what we had to do to protect the family assets from your instability. Yes, we submitted a document. It was a formality, but Vanguard wants a wet signature on the final deed closing tomorrow. You are going to give it to us. Or what? I asked, looking up at her. Or you stay here, she said, gesturing to the squalor of the room. Forever. I will make sure you never work in this city again. I will make sure every potential employer knows about your addiction. You will rot in this room, Regina. And when you die of an overdose, I will be the one crying at your funeral, telling everyone how hard I tried to save you. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It wasn't just greed. It was hate. She hated me because I was the only one who saw her for what she was. For a moment, looking at Julian's desperate, sweating face, I felt a twinge of pity. He was a monster, but he was a monster she had created. He was terrified. He was my brother. Maybe I should just sign. Take the 50,000, disappear. Let them have their blood money. It would be easier. Then, I remembered the snow. I remembered the feeling of the ice seeping into my dress as the security guards dragged me down the steps. I remembered the laughter of the guests. I remembered my father's diary, which I had found in the digital archives. The entry from the week before he died. Catherine asks about the patent every day. She doesn't care about the science. She only asks about the valuation. She loves money more than she loves anyone. Even herself. I have to protect Regina. She is the only one with a heart real enough to break. My heart wasn't broken anymore. It was calcified. I stood up. I smoothed my shirt. I looked Catherine Blackwell in the eye. "No," I said. "What did you say?" Catherine whispered. "I said no," I repeated, my voice steady and clear. "I will not sign. I will not take your hush money. I don't want your $50,000. I don't want your charity." "You are making a mistake," Julian threatened, stepping forward again. "Touch me again, Julian," and I scream. I said, "The walls here are paper thin. The police station is 2 blocks away." He stopped. Catherine stared at me for a long moment. She looked at me as if she had never seen me before, or perhaps she was seeing me for the first time. "Fine," she spat. She grabbed the unsigned document from the table. "Have it your way. Starve, freeze, die. It makes no difference to me. You are dead to me. Regina, you ceased to exist the moment you walked out that door." "I didn't walk," I said. "You threw me." "And I should have thrown you harder," she said. She turned on her heel and marched out the door. Julian glared at me one last time, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred mixed with panic, before following her. The door slammed shut. The cheap frame rattled. I stood there for a minute, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. I picked up my phone. I stopped the recording. Recording saved. 14 minutes, 32 seconds. I pressed play. "Yes, we submitted a document. It was a formality." Catherine's voice, clear as a bell, admitting to the forgery. I forwarded the file to Elias. My phone buzzed immediately. "Elias, I heard it. That is the nail in the coffin. And I have news. Vanguard just confirmed the closing. They are proceeding. They think everything is clear. Regina, they are wrong. Elias, get some rest. Tomorrow is the funeral." I sat down on the bed. I felt drained, hollowed out by the encounter, but underneath the exhaustion, there was a fire burning. They thought I was dead. They thought I was a ghost haunting a cheap motel room. Tomorrow, the ghost was going to walk through the walls of their skyscraper and bring the whole building down. I packed my bag. I put the gray dress in the trash can. I wouldn't need it anymore. I took out the Armani suit from the garment bag I had hidden in the closet. I hung it up where the gray dress had been. The moonlight hit the sharp lapels. "Showtime," I whispered. The Blackwell Luxury headquarters was a monolith of glass and steel that pierced the gray Chicago skyline like a jagged shard of ice. It was a building designed to intimidate. The lobby was a cavern of polished granite and hushed whispers, where the air was filtered to smell like money and exclusivity. I had walked through these doors 1,000 times before. Usually, I was rushing, carrying coffee for the board members, invisible in my beige cardigans, my head down, terrified of being late. Today, I walked in through the revolving doors at 8:55 in the morning. I was not rushing. I was not carrying coffee, and I was certainly not invisible. Beside me, Elias Thorne adjusted his tie. He had shaved, and he was wearing a navy suit that, while older, was pressed to military perfection. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had survived a war zone, in a way. It had, "You ready?" he asked, his voice low. "I have been ready for 10 years, I replied. My reflection caught in the glass of the elevator bank. I barely recognized myself. The charcoal Armani suit was sharp enough to cut skin. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek bun. My makeup was minimal but precise. I didn't look like the frantic, disheveled girl who had been thrown into the snow. I looked like the CEO of a company that was about to execute a hostile takeover. We stepped into the elevator. I pressed the button for the 50th floor. As the car ascended, my ears popped. With every floor we passed, I felt the weight of my past shedding away. The basement where I crunched numbers. The kitchen where I ate leftovers while my family dined in the hall. The front steps where I froze. Ding! The doors slid open. 2 private security guards stood in front of the double mahogany doors of Boardroom A. They were big, thick-necked men who looked like they were carved out of concrete. "ID!" the one on the left grunted, stepping forward to block our path. "Regina Blackwell," I said, my voice cool and even. "And legal counsel." "My name is not on the list, miss," the guard said, crossing his arms. "Closed meeting, restricted access. You need to leave." Elias stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document with a blue court seal stamped on the top. "This is an emergency injunctive order signed by Judge Holloway at 8:30 this morning," Elias said, holding the paper up so the guard could read the text. "It grants my client, Regina Blackwell, status as an interested party with immediate right of entry to these proceedings. If you block this door, you are in contempt of court, and I will have the U.S. Marshals here in 10 minutes to arrest you personally." The guard hesitated. He looked at the seal. He looked at his partner. He looked at the steely determination in Elias's eyes. He stepped aside. Elias pushed the mahogany doors open. The room inside was a tableau of triumph. At the head of the long, oval table sat Catherine Blackwell. She was radiant. She wore a white suit that made her look like a queen. A string of pearls around her neck that cost more than most people's houses. To her right sat Julian. He was vibrating with nervous energy, tapping a gold pen against the table. He looked hungover, his eyes darting around the room, but there was a greedy smirk plastered on his face. To her left was Bella, bored, scrolling on her phone, likely checking her engagement metrics. Across from them sat the Vanguard team, 3 men in gray suits, looking serious and efficient. At the center was Simon LaGrange, the lead auditor. He had a stack of documents in front of him, ready for signature. The air in the room was warm, smelling of fresh pastries and expensive cologne. It was a bubble of safety, insulated from the blizzard raging outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. When the doors opened, the silence that fell was absolute. Catherine looked up, a smile frozen on her face. When she saw me, the blood drained from her skin so fast I thought she might faint. "Regina?" she whispered. Julian dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the glass table. I walked into the room. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was a rhythmic, deliberate percussion. Click, click, click. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't look at my mother with longing or hurt. I looked at her with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. "Profound apologies for the interruption," Elias announced, his voice booming comfortably in the acoustic space. "We are here for the closing." "What is the meaning of this?" Catherine stood up, her voice shrill. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Security! Why did you let her in?" "Court order. Ma'am," the guard called from the hallway, sounding apologetic. "She is mentally unstable," Catherine shouted, turning desperately to Simon LaGrange. "Mr. LaGrange, I am so sorry. This is my daughter. She is unwell. She has been stalking us. She is a drug addict who was recently released from a facility. Please, ignore her. We can have her removed." Simon LaGrange frowned. He looked at me. He took in the Armani suit, the clear eyes, the steady posture. He looked back at Catherine, who was sweating through her makeup. "She does not look unstable to me, Mrs. Blackwell," Simon said dryly. "And if she has a court order, my legal team advises me to hear her out. We do not want any encumbrances on this title." This is ridiculous, Julian yelled. He stood up, knocking his chair over. She is here to beg for money. She is broke. Get her out of here. I ignored him. I walked to the empty chair at the far end of the table, the seat usually reserved for the CEO of the acquiring company, but currently empty as the Vanguard CEO was dialing in via video conference. I pulled the chair out and sat down. I took my laptop from my bag. I placed it on the table. I opened it. The screen glowed blue. I am not here to beg. Julian, I said. My voice was soft, but in the pin-drop silence of the room, it carried to every corner. And I am not here to stop the sale. I am here to ensure that the proceeds go to the rightful owner. The rightful owner is this family, Catherine hissed. Blackwell Luxury belongs to me. Does it? I asked. I typed a few keys. The projector screen behind Catherine, which had been displaying the Vanguard logo, suddenly flickered. It changed to show a live mirror of my laptop screen. It showed the file directory of Project Hephaestus. Julian's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. The veins in his neck bulged. "You bitch!" he screamed. He lost it. The pressure of the gambling debts, the fear of the loan sharks, the shock of seeing me alive and powerful. It snapped something in his brain. He lunged across the table. He scrambled over the polished wood, scattering papers and water glasses, his hands reaching for my throat. "I will kill you," he shrieked. "You ruin everything." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still, watching him come before he could reach me. Two blur-like shapes moved from the wall, the Vanguard Executive Protection Detail. They were faster than Blackwell Security. One of them caught Julian in midair, slamming him down onto the table with a bone-jarring thud. The other twisted his arm behind his back. "Sit down, Mr. Blackwell," the guard growled, pinning Julian to the mahogany. Julian thrashed, sobbing now. "She can't be here. I need that money. They're going to break my legs." "Julian, shut up," Catherine screamed. Simon LaGrange looked horrified. He adjusted his glasses, staring at the chaotic scene. "Mrs. Blackwell, this is highly irregular. Your son seems to be under significant duress. Is there a financial liability regarding Mr. Blackwell that was not disclosed in the diligence?" No, Catherine waved her hands frantically. "He is just passionate. It is a family dispute. Please, let's just sign the papers. We agreed on $90 million. We are ready to sign." She turned to her lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the carpet. "Show them the waiver," Catherine commanded. "Show them she has no rights." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the cream-colored document Julian had forged. He slid it across the table toward Simon LaGrange. "Mr. LaGrange," Sterling said, his voice shaky. "As you can see, we anticipated that Miss Blackwell might attempt to cause trouble due to her estrangement. We have here a signed, notarized waiver of interest, dated January 25th. In it, Regina Blackwell forfeits all claims to the Blackwell luxury estate and intellectual property in exchange for a settlement." Simon picked up the paper. He examined the signature. "It appears to be in order," Simon said. He looked at me. "Miss Blackwell, is this your signature?" The room held its breath. Catherine was staring at me, her eyes wide, willing me to crumble. Bella was actually filming under the table, unable to resist the drama. I looked at the paper. It was a good forgery. Julian had practiced well. "It certainly looks like my handwriting," I said. Catherine let out a breath of relief. "See? She admits it. Now, can we please sign?" Elias Thorne stepped forward. He walked around the table until he was standing directly behind me, his hand resting on the back of my chair like a guardian angel. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just cornered a rabbit. "It does look like her handwriting," Elias agreed pleasantly. "But there is a small problem with the date." "The date is January 25th, Sterling snapped. "So what?" "So," Elias said, reaching into his own briefcase. "On January 25th, My client was not in the Blackwell estate where this document was allegedly notarized by your in-house notary, nor was she in any condition to sign legal documents. She was there, Julian shouted from his seat, where the guard had shoved him back down. I saw her sign it. Interesting, Elias said. Because on January 25th, Regina Blackwell was at the Starlight Motel, and we have the geolocation data from her phone to prove it. But more importantly, Elias paused for effect. He looked at Simon LaGrange. Mr. LaGrange, do you check the metadata on digital submissions? Always, Simon said. Then I suggest you ask Mr. Sterling why the digital scan of this paper document was created on a computer registered to Julian Blackwell, with a creation timestamp of yesterday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Catherine froze. Elias leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a gunshot. That is why we are here, gentlemen, to fix a small error. You see, you are about to buy a stolen company from a group of forgers, and my client is the only one in this room who can actually sell it to you legally. I tapped the enter key on my laptop. The screen changed again. It played an audio file. Catherine's voice filled the room. Yes, we submitted a document. It was a formality. You are going to give us a wet signature. The color drained from Simon LaGrange's face. He dropped the forged waiver as if it were on fire. This meeting is suspended, Simon announced, standing up and gathering his files. Sit down, Mr. LaGrange, I said. It was a command, not a request. Simon stopped. He looked at me. You want to buy this company, I said, locking eyes with him. You need the patent. Without it, your acquisition strategy fails. If you walk out that door, I will take the patent to your biggest competitor, LVMH, by noon. They will pay double what you are offering. Simon slowly sat back down. I am listening, he said. I turned to my mother. She was slumped in her chair, a broken marionette. The pearls around her neck looked like a noose. The deal is still on the table, I said to the room, but the sellers have changed. The silence that followed the audio recording was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. It felt as though the oxygen had been sucked out of boardroom A, leaving only the stale scent of panic and the sharp, metallic taste of adrenaline. Catherine Blackwell was the first to move. She slumped back in her chair, her hand going to her throat as if she were trying to physically hold the words inside. Her face, usually a mask of porcelain perfection, was cracking. The foundation had settled into the deep lines of terror that were now etched around her mouth. Mr. Sterling, her lawyer, looked as though he wanted to dissolve into the floor. He closed his briefcase with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I think, Sterling stammered, his voice rising an octave, that we should take a recess. My client needs to confer with counsel regarding these allegations. Allegations? Elias Thorne laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that bounced off the glass walls. He walked over to the table and slammed a heavy file down in front of Simon LaGrange. These are not allegations, Counselor. That is a forensic audio analysis confirming the voice on the tape is Catherine Blackwell. And this, he pointed to another document, is the metadata report from the server where the forgery was created. It is proof of criminal fraud, attempted grand larceny, and conspiracy to defraud a public corporation. Simon LaGrange stood up slowly. He looked at Catherine with an expression of pure disgust. Mrs. Blackwell, Simon said, his voice icy. Vanguard Corp operates with the highest ethical standards. We do not do business with felons. This deal is terminated immediately. Our legal department will be in touch regarding the breach of the exclusivity agreement and the costs we have incurred during diligence. He turned to his team. Pack it up. We are leaving. No! Julian screamed from the floor, where he was still being held down by the security guard. You can't leave. You promised. We have a deal. The deal is dead, Mr. Blackwell. Simon spat. And frankly, you should be worrying about the district attorney, not your bank account. Simon grabbed his coat. The Vanguard team began to shuffle their papers, closing laptops. preparing to walk out the door and leave the Blackwell family to the wolves. "Mr. LaGrange," I said again, my voice cutting through the noise of the shuffling papers. "I told you to sit down." Simon paused. He looked at me, annoyed. "Miss Blackwell, I appreciate you exposing this fraud. You saved us $100 million, but we have nothing further to discuss. I am not buying a company from criminals." "You are right," I said, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the mahogany table. "You shouldn't buy a company from criminals. But you didn't come here to buy a brand name, did you? You didn't come here for the inventory, which my mother let rot in a flood-damaged warehouse 2 years ago. And you certainly didn't come here for the retail locations, which are hemorrhaging money." I tapped the surface of my laptop. "You came here for one thing, the Blackwell weave, the patent. United States Patent number 88492. Simon stopped. His hand hovered over his briefcase. He knew I was right. The synthetic leather technology was the only thing Vanguard actually cared about. It was the future of their sustainable luxury line. "The patent is owned by Blackwell Luxury," Simon said slowly. "And Blackwell Luxury is owned by a woman who just committed a felony. The asset is toxic. It will be tied up in litigation for a decade." "Correction," Elias said, stepping forward. He pulled a single yellowed document from his jacket pocket. It looked ancient compared to the crisp white legal papers on the table. "The patent was held in trust by Blackwell Luxury. However, you are operating under the assumption that the trust is still valid." Elias slid the document down the long table. It spun perfectly across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of Simon. "I invite you to read Clause 19, Elias said. Simon picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He began to read. I watched Catherine. She was staring at the document. I could see the gears turning in her head, grinding against the rust of her own arrogance. She had never read the full trust. She had just assumed she owned it all because she was Catherine Blackwell. Clause 19, Simon read aloud, his brow furrowing. In the event that the acting trustee is found to be acting in bad faith, engaging in embezzlement, or committing fraud against the beneficiaries, the ownership of the intellectual property known as the Blackwell weave shall bypass the primary beneficiary entity. Simon's voice trailed off. He looked up, his eyes wide. Keep reading, I commanded. And transfer immediately and in full to the direct lineal descendant possessing the requisite financial and operational competency to manage the asset. Simon finished. The room fell silent again. What does that mean? Bella asked from the corner, her voice small and confused. She had stopped filming. It means, Elias said, pointing a finger at Catherine, that the moment you forged that signature, the moment you tried to defraud the estate, you triggered the dead man's switch. You didn't just lose the sale. Catherine, you lost the asset. Elias turned to Simon. As of 4:30 yesterday afternoon, when that forgery was created, the patent for the Blackwell weave no longer belongs to Blackwell Luxury. It automatically transferred to the only qualified heir. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It belongs to Regina Blackwell. Catherine let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. That is a lie. That is impossible. Richard would never do that to me. Richard knew exactly who you were, I said, looking at her. He knew you loved money more than you loved the legacy. He built a trap door. Mother, and you just walked right through it. I turned back to Simon. So here is the situation. Mr. LaGrange, I said, my voice all business. Blackwell Luxury, the company my mother owns, is now a shell. It has millions of dollars in debt, a warehouse full of moldy purses, and a CEO who is about to be indicted. It is worth zero. Actually, it is worth less than zero. I saw Julian go limp in the guard's grip. He understood. If the company was worthless, his shares were worthless. He had no way to pay his debts. He was a dead man walking. However, I continued, the Blackwell weave is pristine. It is unencumbered, and it is owned by a private individual who is ready to do business. I opened a new folder on my laptop. I spun it around so Simon could see. I have drafted a new purchase agreement, I said. Asset sale only. You are not buying the company. You are not buying the liabilities. You are not buying the brand. You are buying the patent, the formulas, and the exclusive manufacturing rights. Clean, simple, no Blackwell family drama attached. Simon looked at the screen. He looked at his team. The other Vanguard executives were nodding. This was actually a better deal for them. They didn't want the baggage of the Blackwell name anymore. They just wanted the tech. The price? Simon asked. $100 million was for the whole company, I said. But we both know the company was dead weight. The patent was 80% of the valuation. So, $80 million. 60, Simon countered instinctively. The market has taken a hit because of this scandal. 75, I said, and I handle the transfer taxes. 70, Simon said. Final offer. I paused. I did the mental math. $70 million gross. After federal taxes, state taxes, legal fees for Elias, and the setup costs for my new venture, it would leave me with a very specific number. $70 million, I agreed. With an immediate wire transfer of the net proceeds upon signature, no escrow, no waiting period. I want the money in my Swiss account before I leave this room. Done, Simon said. No, Catherine shrieked. She launched herself out of her chair. She threw herself across the table, grabbing at the papers, grabbing at Simon's arm. You cannot do this, she screamed. Her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. It is mine. It is my company. She is stealing it. Arrest her. She is a thief. The security guards, the ones Elias had threatened earlier, moved in, but not for me. They grabbed Catherine. Get off me, she yelled, thrashing in their grip. She looked at me, her eyes wild. Regina, you ungrateful little brat. I gave you life. I gave you everything. How dare you steal from me? I stood up. I smoothed the lapels of my Armani suit. I felt 10 feet tall. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. She was panting, her hair coming loose from its perfect coiffure, her lipstick smeared. She looked small. She looked pathetic. I am not a thief. Mother, I said, my voice low and calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. I leaned in close, so only she could hear the full weight of my words. You told the world I was worthless. You told the world I was nothing but a burden. You said I was just an extra mouth to feed. I gestured to the patent document on the table, the piece of paper that was about to turn me into one of the wealthiest women in the room. I didn't steal anything, I whispered. I just took back what you said was worthless. If the patent is trash, and I am trash, then we belong together, don't we? Catherine stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The reality was crashing down on her. She wasn't just losing money, she was losing control. For a narcissist like Catherine Blackwell, that was a fate worse than death. Get her out of my face, I said to the guards. And get him, I pointed to Julian. Out of my boardroom. I have business to conduct. This is not your boardroom, Julian sobbed as they dragged him up. It is Dad's boardroom. Dad left it to the one person smart enough to keep it, I said. Goodbye, Julian. The guards dragged them toward the door. Bella scrambled up, clutching her phone, looking terrified. Regina? She squeaked. I didn't mean the posts. I can delete them. Go with them. Bella, I said without looking at her. You wanted content? You just got the season finale. The heavy doors slammed shut, muffling Catherine's screams. Silence returned to the room, but this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of a clean slate. I sat back down. Simon LaGrange was looking at me with a newfound respect. He pushed a fresh contract across the table. Your lawyers will need to review the indemnification clauses, Simon said, but we can execute the primary transfer now. Elias sat down beside me. He uncapped his fountain pen. It was a cheap plastic one, not a Mont Blanc, but to me, it looked like Excalibur. Let's make some money, Elias said. We spent the next hour redlining the contract. The tension was gone, replaced by the efficient hum of high-level commerce. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the daughter. I was the counterparty. Finally, the documents were ready. Net proceeds, Simon said, typing into his secure banking terminal. After the corporate tax withholding and the expedited processing fees, the total wire amount comes to $57,420,000.00. 57 million. It was a number that was hard to comprehend. It was freedom. It was power. It was the ultimate rebuttal to every insult my family had ever hurled at me. That sounds acceptable, I said, trying to keep my hand steady as I reached for the pen. I signed my name. Regina Blackwell. I didn't sign it with a flourish. I signed it clearly, legibly, and firmly. Simon hit the enter key on his laptop. Transaction initiated, he said. It usually takes about 10 minutes for the International Clearinghouse to verify. We can wait, I said. I turned my chair to face the window. Outside, the blizzard was raging. The snow was whipping against the glass, turning the world white. I watched the flakes collide with the window pane and melt. Down on the street, somewhere in that storm, my mother was probably standing on the sidewalk, shivering in her expensive coat. Realizing that she couldn't get back into the building, Julian was probably frantically calling his bookie. Realizing that no one was going to answer, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I waited for the guilt, I waited for the sadness, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt warm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one out in the cold. I was on the inside, looking out, and the view was magnificent. My phone vibrated on the table. I looked down. It wasn't a text from Bella. It wasn't a threat from Julian. It was a notification from the Swiss bank app I had installed that morning. Incoming wire transfer. Verified. I picked up the phone. I unlocked the screen. The green numbers glowed against the black background. $57,420,000. I looked at Elias. He was grinning. Congratulations, he said softly. You just bought your life back. I looked at the number again. No, I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. I didn't just buy my life back. I bought their silence. I turned to Simon LaGrange and extended my hand. Pleasure doing business with you. Mr. LaGrange? The pleasure was mine, he said, shaking my hand firmly. You are a formidable negotiator. Miss Blackwell, if you ever need a job. I have a job? I said, picking up my briefcase. I am the CEO of my own future. I walked toward the door. Elias followed me. As I reached for the handle, I paused. I looked back at the empty boardroom. I looked at the head of the table where my mother used to sit. It looked just like a chair, just a piece of furniture. It held no power anymore. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The security guards were gone. The receptionists were staring at me, whispering. They knew. The news had probably already spread. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the down button. So, Elias said as the doors opened, what is the first thing you are going to do with $57 million? I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close, sealing off the world of Blackwell luxury forever. I am going to get a cheeseburger, I said. And then, I am going to buy the building where your office is and evict the payday loan guys. Elias laughed. It was a genuine, happy sound. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, he said. No, I corrected him as the elevator began to descend. It is the end of a terrible nightmare. The atmosphere in Boardroom A had shifted from a corporate closing to a public execution. The executioner was not wearing a hood. She was wearing a charcoal Armani suit, and the blade was a digital stylus. The security guards had not removed my family yet. At a sharp hand gesture from Simon LaGrange, they had paused near the door, holding Catherine and Julian in a firm grip, forcing them to turn around and watch. It was cruel, perhaps, but in the world of high finance, clarity was more valuable than mercy. Simon wanted no ambiguity. He wanted the former owners to witness the transfer of title so that later, when the inevitable lawsuits flew, there would be 3 witnesses who had seen the empire change hands with their own eyes. "Print the new agreement," Simon ordered his assistant. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life. The sound was rhythmic and strangely soothing, like a heartbeat. Every sheet that slid into the tray was another shovel of dirt on the grave of Blackwell luxury. Catherine stood frozen near the exit. Her face was a landscape of ruin. The makeup that had been perfect an hour ago was now settling into the deep crevices of her panic. She looked at the printer, then at me. Her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated hatred. Julian was not silent. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving against the arm of the guard holding him. "You can't do this," Julian wheezed, sweat dripping from his nose onto his silk tie. "Regina, listen to me. We can split it. We can work something out. I need 8 million. Just 8. That is nothing to you now. Please." I didn't look at him. I looked at Simon. "The terms acceptable?" I asked. "Asset purchase of the intellectual property only," Simon confirmed, reading from his tablet. 70 million gross, after the agreed deductions for immediate tax withholding and the expedited wire fees. The net payment to your designated account is $57,420,000. "Do it," I said. The assistant placed the fresh, warm paper in front of me. I picked up the pen. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning system and the ragged breathing of my mother across the room. I signed my name. The ink flowed black and permanent. Simon signed next to me. "Contract executed," Simon announced. He typed a command into his laptop. On the massive projection screen that covered the entire north wall of the boardroom, the Vanguard banking interface appeared. It was a stark, gray window with fields for account numbers and routing codes. My account details were already there. Catherine let out a low moan, like a wounded animal. "That is my money," she whispered. "That is my company." "It was never your company, Mother," I said, not looking up from the screen. "It was Dad's, and he left it to the one person who wouldn't sell it for a poker chip or a new pair of shoes." Simon hit the final authorization key. A progress bar appeared on the giant screen. It was green against the gray background. Processing international wire transfer. "No!" Julian screamed. The sound tore through the room. He thrashed violently, nearly breaking free from the guard. "Stop it! Stop the transfer! Mama, do something! They are going to kill me! They are going to cut my fingers off!" "Julian, stop begging her!" Catherine shrieked, her pride warring with her desperation. "She is a thief! She tricked us!" The progress bar hit 50%. I sat with my hands folded on the table. My heart should have been racing. I should have been trembling, but I felt nothing but a cold, heavy stillness. It was the stillness of the ocean floor. I was watching the pressure crush them while I remained untouched. 75%, Bella, who had been cowering near the door, suddenly seemed to realize that the money was real. It wasn't just numbers on a page. It was a lifestyle. It was her future. She pulled away from the wall and took a step toward me. "Regina," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I am your sister. I posted those things because Mom made me. I didn't mean it. Don't leave us with nothing." 90%. "You left me with nothing in the snow, Bella," I said softly. "You didn't just post the pictures. You put a filter on them to make me look more pathetic. You monetized my suffering." 99%. The room held its breath. Julian stopped screaming. Catherine stopped breathing. Even the Vanguard executives seemed mesmerizing by the finality of the moment. Ding! The sound came from my phone, which was sitting face up on the mahogany table. It was a cheerful, bright chime, the default notification sound for the Swiss bank app. At the exact same moment, the giant screen flashed green. Transaction complete. Amount, $57,420,000. The number hung there, massive and glowing. It illuminated the faces of my family. It reflected in Julian's terrified eyes. It cast a green pallor over Catherine's white skin. 57 million. For a long time, nobody moved. The number itself seemed to have a gravitational pull, sucking all the air out of the room. It was more money than my mother had seen in liquid cash in 20 years. It was enough to pay Julian's debts 7 times over. It was enough to buy Bella 1,000 lifetimes of relevance, and it was all mine. The silence was total. They were speechless, truly, physically unable to form words in the face of such absolute defeat. I slowly stood up. My chair scraped softly against the floor. I picked up my phone. I looked at the balance. It was real. I walked around the table. I didn't rush. I moved with the leisurely pace of someone who owned her own time. I stopped 3 feet away from Catherine. The guards were still holding her, but she wasn't fighting anymore. She was sagging, looking old and small. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Not anger, not annoyance, fear. She realized that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. "You," she croaked. "How could you?" I looked her dead in the eye. "You stood on a stage," I said, my voice clear and steady, "and you told 200 people that I was a burden. You said I was a leech. You said, specifically, that I was just an extra mouth to feed." I held up the phone, showing her the green screen one last time. "Well, Mother," I said, "I can feed myself now. The question is, can you?" Catherine flinched as if I had slapped her. She opened her mouth to speak, to curse me, to beg. But nothing came out. She just stared at the number, the realization of her own bankruptcy crashing down on her. To my left, I saw movement. Bella had pulled out her phone. Old habits died hard. Even in the midst of the apocalypse, her instinct was to record. She was holding it up, aiming the camera at me, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. "Guys," she sobbed into the camera, "my sister just stole our inheritance. She is literally leaving us homeless. Look at her. She is a monster." Before I could react, Elias Thorne moved. He didn't grab the phone. He simply stepped in front of Bella's camera lens, holding up a leather-bound folio. "Isabella Blackwell," Elias boomed, his voice dropping into his courtroom register. "I am serving you with an immediate cease and desist order regarding the use of my client's image, name, or likeness on any social media platform. Furthermore, this document contains a restraining order preventing you, your brother, or your mother from coming within 500 feet of Regina Blackwell or her assets." He shoved the paper into Bella's free hand. "If you live stream one more second of this," Elias said, leaning in close, "I will sue you for defamation, and since you currently have 0 assets, I will garnish your wages for the next 40 years. You will be paying Regina every time you sell a tube of lipstick until you are 90. Bella turned pale. She lowered the phone. She ended the stream. Her thumb hovered over the delete button, shaking. "Good choice," Elias said. I turned back to the table. I picked up my laptop. I placed it in my bag. "Mr. LaGrange," I said, nodding to the Vanguard team, "thank you for a smooth transaction. The patent access codes have been emailed to your technical lead." "Thank you, Miss Blackwell," Simon said. He looked at my family, then back at me. "Do you need security to escort you out?" "No," I said. "I think the security is needed right here." I gestured to Julian, who was now weeping silently, his head hanging low. "He has some creditors who will be very disappointed to hear about today's events. You might want to keep the building on lockdown until the police arrive, for his safety." I walked toward the door. Elias fell in step beside me. As we reached the threshold, I stopped. I didn't turn around. I just spoke to the room one last time. "The house is in foreclosure. Mother," I said, "I checked the bank records this morning. You have 30 days to vacate. I suggest you start packing. Winter in Chicago is unforgiving if you don't have a roof over your head." I stepped out into the hallway. The heavy doors swung shut behind us, sealing them inside with their failure. I walked down the long corridor toward the elevators. The carpet felt softer now. The light seemed brighter. Did you see her face? Elias asked, a rare grin breaking through his stoic demeanor. I have waited 10 years to see Catherine Blackwell look like that. It was worth every penny of the billable hours I'm not charging you. You are charging me. Elias, I said, pressing the elevator call button. You are charging me full rate, and a bonus. We can afford it. The elevator arrived. We stepped inside. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of the Blackwell luxury sign on the wall, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 29 years. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Your balance is $57,420,000. I touched the screen. It was cold glass, but it felt like the warmest thing in the world. Where to? Elias asked. The bank, I said. And then I think I need to buy a new coat. This one smells like my old life. The elevator dropped, carrying us down to the street, down to the snow, down to the city that was no longer a prison, but a playground. The collapse of the Blackwell Empire did not happen in slow motion. It happened with the violent, terrifying speed of a skyscraper whose foundation had been detonated. It started 10 minutes after I walked out of the Vanguard boardroom. Simon LaGrange was a man of his word, and more importantly, he was a man who protected his own compliance record. Vanguard issued a press release at exactly 10:30 in the morning. It was brief, clinical, and devastating. It stated that Vanguard Corp was terminating its acquisition of Blackwell Luxury due to newly discovered irregularities in ownership and concerns regarding executive misconduct. That vague legal phrasing was like blood in the water for the financial sharks. I sat in a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks away, watching the financial news network on my phone. The ticker at the bottom of the screen turned red. Blackwell Luxury stock, which had been trading at $42 a share on the rumor of the buyout, began to freefall. By 11 o'clock, it was down to $20. By noon, when the rumor leaked that the CEO, my mother, was being investigated for fraud and forgery, the stock hit $8. By the time the market closed at 4 in the afternoon, Blackwell Luxury shares were trading for 63 cents. It was a total wipeout. The company was now worth less than the inventory sitting in its damp warehouses. But the financial ruin was just the opening act. The real show was the social disintegration. I watched it all from a distance, like a scientist observing a colony of ants under a magnifying glass. I had set up Google alerts for every member of my family, and my phone did not stop buzzing for 3 days. The first domino to fall physically was the house. The bank that held the mortgage on the Blackwell estate had been lenient for years, banking on the Vanguard sale to clear the massive arrears Catherine had accumulated. But banks are fair weather friends. The moment the news broke that the sale was dead and the patent, the only valuable asset, was gone. The bank moved with predatory efficiency. I saw the photos on a local gossip blog. 2 sheriff's deputies were standing at the front gate. A locksmith was drilling through the ornate iron lock that Catherine had imported from France. They weren't just foreclosing, they were seizing. The article said that Catherine was escorted off the premises with only 2 suitcases, the furs, the art, the antique furniture, everything she had used to define her worth, was tagged as property of the bank. I imagined her standing on that curb. I wondered if she felt the cold the way I had. I wondered if she looked back at the warm, glowing windows and realized that the warmth had never really belonged to her. Julian was the next to vanish. His collapse was less public but far more dangerous. The loan sharks he owed $8 million to did not care about stock prices or SEC investigations. They cared about their principal. I received a notification from a dark web monitoring service Elias had set up for me. A bounty had been posted. It wasn't an official police warrant. It was a street notice. Anyone with information on the whereabouts of Julian Blackwell was offered $10,000 cash. Julian knew what that meant. He didn't go home to pack. He didn't go to his club. He disappeared. The rumors were that he was sleeping in the boiler rooms of the subway system, trading his bespoke suits for anonymity. The man who had sneered at me for being a waitress was now likely eating out of dumpsters, terrified that every shadow held a man with a tire iron. He had wanted the street life to be my punishment. Now, it was his prison. And then there was Bella. Bella's fall was perhaps the most pathetic because it was entirely self-inflicted. After Elias served her with the cease and desist order, she had panicked. But Bella was a creature of the internet, and she made the fatal mistake of thinking the internet would save her. She posted a video. It was a tearful 6-minute monologue filmed in the back of a taxi. She wore no makeup, a calculated move, and cried about how she was a victim of a vindictive sister and how her family was being bullied by legal loopholes. She asked her followers to start a GoFundMe to help them save their house. The backlash was nuclear. The internet does not like rich people begging for money, especially when the news is simultaneously reporting that those rich people committed fraud. The comments section turned into a slaughterhouse. You guys stole a patent and now you want us to pay your rent? Get a job. Sell your handbags. Your sister is a hero. You are a leech. Then came the brand terminations. I watched them roll in on her public feed. A skincare company posted a statement distancing themselves from the Blackwell brand. A fashion label announced they were dropping her as an ambassador effective immediately. Bella lost 3 million followers in 24 hours. For someone whose entire existence was validated by numbers, this was a spiritual death. She deleted her account on Friday night. The silence that followed was the first honest thing she had produced in years. While they were falling, I was building. On Saturday morning, I met Elias at his office. We weren't there to discuss lawsuits. We were there to sign deeds. Are you sure you want to do this? Elias asked, looking over the paperwork. It is a money pit. Regina. The heating system needs to be replaced. The roof is leaking, and the taxes are a nightmare. I am sure, I said. I signed the papers. I didn't buy a penthouse in the city. I didn't buy a villa in Tuscany. I bought the Blackwell estate. The bank was desperate to unload the toxic asset. They sold it to a blind trust I had established named Richard's Legacy LLC. They had no idea I was the beneficiary. I bought the house my father built. The house my mother had turned into a fortress of greed. For pennies on the dollar, I paid $4 million for a property that was once valued at 20. I didn't move in. I had no intention of living there. I simply wanted to own the keys. I wanted to ensure that Catherine Blackwell could never, ever step foot on that grass again unless I allowed it. I hired a private security firm, not the one my mother used, but a professional detail, to stand guard at the gate. Their orders were simple: no unauthorized entry. Especially not by former residents. By Monday, the legal noose tightened around Catherine. The IRS does not sleep. When Elias had presented the evidence of the shell companies and the offshore accounts during our preparation, he had also quietly forwarded a packet to the federal tax authorities. Catherine was indicted on 3 counts of tax evasion and 2 counts of wire fraud. She wasn't arrested immediately. White-collar crime moves slower than street crime, but her passport was confiscated. She was trapped in Chicago, homeless, friendless, and facing a federal prison sentence. That was when the phone calls started. It began on Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my new temporary office, a suite at the Peninsula Hotel, reviewing investment portfolios. My phone vibrated. Mom. I stared at the screen. I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Mom. Then a text message. Regina, please pick up. It is an emergency. Then another. I have nowhere to go. They took the house. I am sleeping on a friend's couch. Please, I am your mother. I watched the messages appear on the screen. They were masterpieces of manipulation. She didn't apologize for the forgery. She didn't apologize for the cruelty. She just appealed to biology, as if giving birth to me created a debt I was obligated to repay with my dignity. Then Julian called. From a blocked number. Regina, pick up. I need $5,000. Just $5,000. I will pay you back. They found me. I am at a motel on Cicero. Please. Sis, I am begging you. Then Bella, can you just talk to us? People are being so mean to me. I don't know what to do. By Wednesday evening, I had 112 missed calls. I didn't block them. Blocking them would have been an emotional reaction. It would have shown that they still had the power to annoy me. Instead, I let the phone ring. I turned the ringer off and just watched the screen light up. Every missed call was a reminder of their desperation. Every unanswered text was a reversal of the silence they had imposed on me for years. When I was living in the basement, asking for a heating vent to be fixed, they had ignored me. When I asked for tuition money, they had ignored me. When I asked for love, they had ignored me. Now, I was giving them exactly what they had taught me. I was giving them silence, and in a world where they needed money to survive. Silence was the loudest sound imaginable. It was the sound of a check not being written. It was the sound of a door not being opened. I listened to one voicemail. Just one. From Catherine. Regina. Her voice cracked, stripped of all its haughty pretension. I made you who you are. You owe me. I deleted it. She was right. She had made me who I was. She had made me unbreakable. And I paid that debt by letting her live with the consequences of her creation. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after the signing ceremony, I took a ride. I hired a car to take me out to the suburbs, to the quiet, rolling hills of the Oak Ridge Cemetery. It had snowed the night before. The ground was covered in a pristine white blanket, untouched and pure. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. I walked through the rows of granite headstones until I found the simple marker. Richard Blackwell, beloved father and husband, 1965 to 2020. The grave looked neglected. Catherine hadn't paid for the landscaping maintenance in 2 years. There were dead weeds poking through the snow. I knelt down. The cold wetness seeped into the knees of my jeans. But I didn't mind. I opened my bag. I didn't have flowers. Flowers died. Flowers were temporary. I pulled out a document. It was a copy of the patent transfer. United States Patent Number 88492. The top of the document listed the new owner, Regina Blackwell. I placed the paper on the cold stone. I weighed it down with a small, heavy rock I had picked up from the path. "Hi, Dad," I whispered. My breath formed a cloud in the frigid air. I fixed it. It took me a while, and I had to break a few things to do it. But I fixed it. I reached out and brushed a layer of snow off his name. "You were right about the dead man's switch," I said. "It worked, but you were wrong about one thing. You thought I needed the money to be safe. I didn't need the money. I needed the truth." I sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind whistle through the bare trees. I told him about the house. I told him about buying it back. I promised him that I would turn it into something better than a shrine to greed. "I am not going to let her in, Dad," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "I know you would probably forgive her. You were always too kind. But I am not you. I am the person she made me." I stood up. My legs were stiff. "I am going to build the company you wanted." I promised the stone. Sustainable, ethical, real, no more lies, no more shortcuts. I turned to leave. As I walked back toward the waiting car, my phone buzzed one more time. I pulled it out. It was a text from Catherine. "They are issuing a warrant for my arrest tomorrow. Please, I am afraid." I stopped. I looked at the message. I looked at the snow stretching out in every direction, endless and white. I thought about the night she threw me out. I thought about the fear I had felt, the absolute, bone-deep terror of having nowhere to go. She was afraid. Good. Fear was a teacher. I typed a reply. It was the first time I had responded in 7 days. "You have a warm coat. Mother, you will be fine." I didn't hit send. I looked at the words. They were petty. They were exactly what she would have said. I backspaced. I deleted the message. I put the phone back in my pocket. The screen dark. I got into the car. "Where to, Miss Blackwell?" the driver asked. "Forward," I said. "Just drive forward." The car pulled away, leaving the graveyard and the ghosts behind. I left the phone ringing in my pocket, a muffled vibration that no longer reached my heart. The empire had fallen. The dust had settled. And for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. 2 months had passed since the storm. Chicago was beginning to thaw. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office on the 45th floor of the Willis Tower, the city looked like a circuit board of gray and silver. Slowly waking up from a long hibernation, the ice on Lake Michigan was cracking, revealing jagged lines of deep, dark blue water underneath. I turned my chair away from the view and looked at the space around me. My office did not smell like old money or stale cedar. It smelled of espresso, fresh printer paper, and possibility. The furniture was modern, ergonomic, and functional. There were no oil paintings of dead ancestors staring down in judgment. Instead, one wall was covered in a whiteboard filled with flowcharts, projection models, and names. The name on the frosted glass door read, R.B. Ventures. It was my initials, my name, my company. I wasn't in the luxury goods business anymore. I had no interest in selling handbags to people who didn't need them. I was in the freedom business. I picked up the file on my desk. It was an application from a 19-year-old girl named Sarah. She was a brilliant coder who had been kicked out of her house in Naperville because her parents didn't approve of her lifestyle. She was currently living in her car, trying to finish her degree on public Wi-Fi. I picked up my pen, a heavy black Mont Blanc that had belonged to my father, and wrote a note in the margin. Approve seed funding, $50,000, plus housing stipend. It was a small amount to me now, a rounding error. But I knew exactly what that $50,000 would do for Sarah. It would stop the shivering. It would turn the heat back on. It would buy her the one thing money was actually good for, the right to say no to anyone who tried to control her. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," I called out. Elias Thorne walked in. He looked 10 years younger than the man I had met in the strip mall office. He was wearing a suit that fit him properly, and the gray pallor of cheap whiskey and regret had been replaced by the healthy glow of a man who had won the biggest case of his life. "Morning, boss," he said, placing a steaming cup of coffee on my desk. "I told you not to call me that." I smiled, taking the cup. "Force of habit," he grinned, sinking into the chair opposite me. "I brought the final papers for the incorporation, and I brought the other news, the update you asked for." My smile faded slightly. "Go ahead." Elias opened his leather folio. He pulled out a series of clippings and legal notices. "Let's start with the big one," he said. "The bankruptcy court finalized Catherine's Chapter 7 filing yesterday afternoon. The liquidation is complete. The bank took the house, the cars, the jewelry, and the remaining contents of the safety deposit boxes." "Where is she?" I asked. I didn't feel a spike of adrenaline. I didn't feel fear. I just felt a mild curiosity, like asking about the weather in a foreign country. "She has been placed in assisted housing," Elias said. "A complex called The Groves, down near the industrial district. It is a government-subsidized efficiency apartment, 400 square feet, concrete floors, no dishwasher." I nodded slowly. I knew The Groves. It was exactly the kind of place Catherine used to point at from the back of her limousine and make jokes about. She used to call the people who lived there the unwashed masses. "She is furious, of course," Elias continued. "She tried to sue the bankruptcy trustee for emotional distress. The judge threw it out and sanctioned her for wasting the court's time. She is living on a state stipend of $1,200 a month." "$1,200?" I repeated. "She used to spend that on lunch." "Julian is having a harder time," Elias said, sliding a mugshot across the desk. The photo showed a man who looked like a ghost of my brother. His hair was shaved, his face was bruised, and his eyes were hollow. "He was picked up in a sting operation in St. Louis 3 days ago," Elias explained. "He was trying to open credit cards using stolen identities to pay off the loan sharks. Federal charges for wire fraud and identity theft. Since he has a prior record of financial delinquency, the DA is pushing for 8 years. No bail." I looked at the picture. I remembered him laughing as he poured wine on my dress. I remembered him holding me against the wall of the motel room. The monster in my memory had been giant. The man in the photo looked small and broken. "And Bella?" I asked. "Bella is actually employed," Elias said, a note of surprise in his voice. "She is working at the grand opening of the new outlet mall. She is running a kiosk that sells knockoff perfume. Apparently, she is quite good at it, although she has to wear a uniform." "A uniform?" I mused. "She hated uniforms. She hates starving more," Elias noted. He closed the folder. The grim business was done. "So," he said, leaning back, "that is the past. What about the future? I have the contract here for the general counsel position. Are you sure about this, Regina? You could hire a big firm. You could have an army of Ivy League lawyers." "I don't want an army," I said. "I want a partner. You were the only one who stood by me when I had nothing but a USB drive and a grudge. You are the only one I trust to watch my back." I pushed the contract toward him. "Besides," I added, "I need someone to remind me not to become them. If I ever start acting like Catherine Blackwell, Elias, I want you to fire me." Elias chuckled. Picking up the pen, "Consider it done." He signed the papers. Just like that, the man whose career my mother had destroyed was now the chief legal officer of one of the fastest-growing venture funds in Chicago. It was poetic justice written in ink. I turned back to my computer. I logged into my primary account. The number was still there. It had changed slightly due to interest and the investments I had made, but the core of it remained. $57,800,000. For the first week, I had checked it every hour. I was terrified it would disappear. I was terrified it was a glitch. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I was back in the Starlight Motel with the wind rattling the windows. But now, 2 months later, the number had stopped being a source of anxiety. It had become something else. It was a shield. It was a wall of solid gold that stood between me and the cruelty of the world. It meant I never had to smile at someone I despised. It meant I never had to say yes when I wanted to say no. It meant that no one, ever again, could tell me I was an extra mouth to feed. I wasn't just feeding myself. I was feeding the dreams of people like Sarah, the coder living in her car. I was feeding the future. "I have one more thing to do today," I said to Elias. "The donation for the Saint, Jude's Home for Children. I promised the director I would have the check ready by noon." "That is a big check," Elias noted. "It is," I agreed. $1 million. It will build a new wing for the orphans who age out of the foster system. It will give them a place to stay so they don't end up on the street." I opened the checkbook. The checks were heavy, cream-colored paper. They felt significant. I uncapped my father's pen again. The nib glided across the paper. "Pay to the order of Saint, Jude's Home. Amount, $1 million and 00 over 100. I signed my name, Regina Blackwell. My signature was different now. It was bolder. It took up more space. It was the signature of a woman who knew she belonged in the room. I tore the check out and placed it in an envelope. "Can you have the courier run this over?" I asked. "I will take it myself," Elias said, standing up. "I want to see the director's face. She might faint." "Make sure she doesn't," I laughed. "We need her to build that wing." Elias walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. "You know," he said, looking back at me, "your father would be proud, not of the money, but of this." He gestured to the office, to the work, to the peace in my eyes. "I know," I said softly. Elias left. The room was quiet again. I spun my chair around to face the window. The snow had started to fall again, large, lazy flakes drifting down from the gray sky. It was mesmerizing. Down there, 50 floors below, people were rushing through the cold, heads down, collars up, fighting the wind. I remembered that fight. I remembered the stinging cold on my cheeks. But up here, behind the triple-paned glass, it was 72 degrees. It was warm. It was safe. My phone, sitting on the corner of the desk, began to buzz. I glanced at it. The caller ID flashed a single word: Mom. It was the first time she had called in 2 weeks. Maybe she wanted to complain about the heating in her new apartment. Maybe she wanted to scream at me for buying the house. Maybe she just wanted to tell me she hated me one last time. My hand hovered over the phone. I could pick it up. I could answer. I could yell at her. I could tell her exactly how pathetic she was. I could list every sin she had ever committed against me and relish in her misery. I could flaunt my victory. I could tell her about the $1 million check I just signed. But then I realized something. Anger is a connection. Hate is a bond. As long as I was angry at her, I was still tied to her. I was still playing her game, just from the other side of the board. To truly win, I didn't need to defeat her. I had already done that. To truly win, I needed to let her go. I withdrew my hand. I didn't decline the call. I didn't block the number. I simply let it ring. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I turned back to the window. I watched a snowflake attach itself to the glass. A perfect, intricate star of ice. It held on for a moment, fighting against the warmth of the building, and then, inevitably, it melted. It turned into a tiny droplet of water and slid down the pane, disappearing into nothingness. The buzzing stopped. The screen went dark. I took a deep breath. The air in my lungs felt clean. I picked up the file for the next applicant, a young architect who wanted to design sustainable housing for low-income families. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's get to work." I uncapped the pen. I went back to building my empire. I didn't need to look back. There was nothing behind me but ghosts and snow. And I had walked out of that winter a long time ago. Living well wasn't just the best revenge. It was the only revenge that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Regina and her journey from the cold streets of Chicago to the heights of success. It has been an incredible ride, and I hope you enjoyed every twist and turn of her revenge and redemption. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a snowy city like Chicago, or somewhere warm and sunny? Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Regina's final decision. Was silence truly the best punishment? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Sunday Drama Stories, like this video to show your support, and smash that hype button so we can share this story with even more people around the world. Your support means everything to us. See you in the next story.